serious look on my face. I just gave my son some advice. That's why I'm late. So I'm all serious and stuff. And then I get to see my Kermit the Frog head. Actually, it's a Jim Henson head. Like, get out of the way, Jim. We can see you. Kind of like that. That's all I can say about it. I didn't mark where we left off. All right, that's fine. I have highlighted. The whiteness celebrated. So we are on chapter number 9. Is Paris Burning is the name of the chapter. We're in Black Looks. We'll just get right to it. Because we work, we produce is what we do here in the classroom. Behind closed doors. Woo. It is day 301, January 21st. Thanks for joining me here in the classroom. This is the reading room where we are reading Black Looks, Race, and Representations. We're on day 18. Let's get to it. As I said, the whiteness celebrated in Paris is Burning is not just any old brand of whiteness, but rather the brutal, imperial, ruling class, capitalist, patriarchal whiteness that presents itself, its way of life, as the only meaningful life there is. And this is, really important. It's not whiteness. We can't tell who buys into this based on their whiteness. As I said last hour, I'm getting too GD white as it is. I mean, I haven't been as dark as I should be in a long time. And I'm not celebrating that. I'm not. Why? Because I like oh boy, do I like my dark skin. As dark as I get. I'm not saying I turn into coal. But, but this is one other thing that I didn't bring up yesterday, and I think that this is important. I think this is really important. That I'm pretty sure I saw Paris is Burning, and I was just not at all impressed. From what I'm getting here, it seems like, yeah, that's what I saw, which was this predominantly they keep talking about the backdrop of this, right? So the backdrop is Eurocentrism and white supremacy. But that's not what they're showing you. They're showing you, yeah, here it is. Black gay brothers, some of whom were drag queens, worshiping at the throne of whiteness. That's what you saw. Not impressed. Not impressed. I remember I don't need to see this kind of deprivation. I might need to know it exists. I'll agree with you there. I might need to know that it exists because I'm a mental health professional. So I do have to know that it exists, right? But I don't have to see it. I don't have to contemplate it. It's clear to my sensibility that there's something that's not rational about this. Okay? So I can approach it as a mental health professional, or I can approach it as a political pundit. You know how I stand on that. So I thought it was just an exposition of depravity. And I think that too often happens in association with the depraved people in the entertainment industry, where it begins to leak out and we get to see it, right? Beach Boys association with Charles Manson. United States Association paperclip or whatever it was, Operation Paperclip, right? With the Nazis. All this, the Catholic Inquisition. How'd they get called the Spanish Inquisition? Isn't that what it used to be? The Catholic Inquisition? Right? I mean, this switch of emphasis. Like, who are you if you didn't watch Paris is Burning and say, oh, that was just superb? And why would you say it was superb? Who would say that was superb? That kind of degradation. To say it exists is one thing. Again, I'm a mental health professional. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. They got back my French vanilla tea in Walmart. I was so happy. I really was. I was happy because I misplaced the tea. Not that they didn't need green tea misplaced, because I could not possibly stand there for less than an hour and misplace all the green tea. Okay. So you've got this background, right? Where I'm making my statement with the visual of depravity that only depraved individuals would really connect with. And if you don't get the undertones of what I'm saying is, I'll be frank about it. When you live that kind of primitive, go for it now, sexually free, liberal, and this is the thing that the traditionalists hated about the liberals, was that this was the slippery slope. Well, no, it's not. It's no more of a slippery slope than pot was a slippery slope. Oh, but you didn't recognize the slippery slope of alcohol. You didn't recognize the slippery slope of capitalism, of patriarchy. What could be more reassuring to a white public fearful that marginalized, disenfranchised Black folks might rise any day now and make revolutionary Black liberation struggle a reality than a documentary affirming that colonized, victimized, exploited Black folks are all too willing to be complicit and perpetuating the fantasy that ruling class white culture is the quintessential site of unrestricted joy, freedom, power, and pleasure. Think about that. Think about that. And I'll just give you the name RuPaul. Think about that, right? I don't know who you are. I know what media says you represent. I know the representations of you in mass media and what you are doing. And, if it works, don't fix it kind of mentality. See, the Bookless Classroom speaks to your position on your testing, pass or failure, of the American businessman. Right? What you are doing is exactly this. Perpetuating the fantasy that ruling class white culture is the quintessential site of unrestricted joy, freedom, power, and pleasure. Your position might be subordinate, but look at the luxuries you've obtained. See, for a modern day version of a historical basis, with a modern historical basis, see The Apprentice. There's a lot in this chapter that is getting highlighted. It really, look at that. Indeed, it is the very pleasure that so many white viewers with class privilege experience when watching this film that has acted to censor dissenting voice, who find the film and its reception critically problematic. Yeah, exactly. and go and tell a gay public that they don't like this transvestite video, basically because they think it's degrading. You what? And that's all I can say on it. In Vincent Canby's review of the film in the New York Times, he begins by quoting the words of a black father to his homosexual son. The father shares that it is difficult for black men to survive in a racist society, and that if you're black and male and gay, you have to be stronger than you can imagine. Really? Maybe make a different choice in the one that's available. Or at least pretend to and shut the F up about it. Fill in any race. Beginning his overwhelming positive review with the words of a straight black father, Canby implies that the film in some way documents such strength is a portrait of black gay pride. Yet he in no way, is this all you got? You know, well, what is one man's degradation is another man's pride. Again, shut the F up about it. Yet he in no way, opposite side, yet he in no way indicates ways this pride and power are evident in the work. Like most reviewers of the film, what he finds most compelling is the pageantry of the drag balls. He uses no language identifying race and class perspectives when suggesting at the end of his piece that behind the role playing there is also a terrible sadness in the testimony. Canby does not identify fully the sources of this sadness. Instead, he states, the queens knock themselves out to imitate the members of a society that will not have them. This makes it appear that the politics of the ruling class white culture are solely social and not political, solely aesthetic questions of choice and desire rather than expressions of power and privilege. Canby does not tell readers that much of the tragedy and sadness of this film is evoking by the willingness of black gay men to knock themselves out imitating a ruling class culture and power elite that is one of the primary agents of their oppression and exploitation. And in a drag queen film, they're not doing it very well either. Ironically, the very fantasies evoked emerge from the colonizing context, and while marginalized people often appropriate and subvert aspects of the dominant culture, Paris is Burning does not forcefully suggest that such a process is taking place. Livingston's film is presented as though it is politically neutral. It is where? Let's start with its title. Okay, perfect. Argument made right there. Livingston's film is presented as though it is a politically neutral documentary, Paris is Burning, providing a candid, even celebratory look at black drag balls. Okay, now this goes to Colin Quinn and Saturday Night Fever Live over there, where he is doing a ball thing. And why is he doing this on last episode? And I'm reading about it now in an entirely different context. That's what I'm talking about. The whole time I'm literally thinking they're talking balls. And they are. Which one do you think I thought they were talking about? You know, which argues the point. And it is precisely the mood of celebration that masks the extent to which the balls are not necessarily radical expressions of subversive imagination at work, undermining and challenging the status quo. And now this is also beginning to be reminiscent, of course. What's the mental imagery that is coming up now? Well, back to present time. the ballroom that's being built at the White House, right? Which then brings to my mind the frivolous behaviors in The Apprentice that match the same frivolous behaviors that I read about when Pope Benedict was there in the Catholic big house, right? So, okay, we got balls flying and drag queens all over the place. Let's go on. And it is precisely, and you know, normalizing it all over the map. Okay, go on. It is precisely the mood of celebration that masks the extent to which the balls are not necessarily radical expressions of subversive imagination at work, undermining and challenging the status quo. Much of the film's focus on pageantry takes the ritual of the black drag ball and makes it spectacle. Ritual is that ceremonial act that carries with it meaning and significance beyond what appears, while spectacle functions primarily as entertaining dramatic display. And the difference there then becomes, hold on, I gotta turn that heat down before I turn it to a boil. Is that why would you turn it into spectacle? Why would you turn your meaningful point into spectacle? You would do it for white pride. Woo! I sometimes think that some of these people in the visual, whatever, that they are people that I know or have known, and that they have mixed it up for all kinds of reasons if I am even close to being the teacher, right? The teacher I have to go in front of after I did all this and that and the other thing. But being of a Catholic background and believing that Catholics have something to do with all of the mystery that's going on around me, and I do believe that there must be, well, first of all, a need for a mental health professional in the Catholic community, and that need is very direct, like directly associated with me being able to provide a need. Not actually creating the need. So again, I'm not stopping so much to highlight, although there's so much to highlight here. I did see the highlights coming through the other side at the right point. So again, the difference here between being ceremonial, ritual is that ceremonial act that carries with it meaning and significance beyond what appears. And it's inspirational and it brings you to tears because there aren't words for it, for what it means, right? As opposed to spectacle, right? Which is an entertaining dramatic display. Okay. And it's, yeah, when it's a gesture, I suppose, never met one, given one, those of us who have grown up in a segregated Black setting where we participated in diverse pageants and rituals know those elements of a given ritual that are empowering and subversive may not readily may not be readily visible to an outsider looking in. Hence, it is easy for white observers to depict black rituals as spectacle. Was the writer black or white? I got the impression he was black. Jenny Livingston approaches her subject. I don't know. So Jenny Livingston approaches her subject matter as an outsider looking in, since her presence as white woman lesbian filmmaker is absent from Paris is Burning. It is all right. I got that. Now I got it right. Okay. It is easy for viewers to imagine that they are watching an ethnographic film documenting the life of black gay natives and not recognize that they are watching a work shaped by, informed by a perspective and standpoint specific to Livingston. By cinematically masking this reality, we hear her ask questions but never see her. Livingston does not oppose the way hegemonic whiteness represents blackness, but rather assumes an imperial overseeing position that is in no way progressive or counter-hegemonic. Who is this bitch? Livingston assumes a privileged location of innocence. She is represented both in interviews and reviews as the tender-hearted, mild-mannered, virtuous white woman daring to venture into a contemporary heart of darkness to bring back knowledge of the natives. Okay, Jesus, give us women a bad name, you bitch. Holy smokes. Us investigative scientific minds that come into the other world. Hey, listen, don't think I haven't seen progression over here. Wow. Those are them's fighting words. A review in the New Yorker declares with no argument to substantiate the assertion that the quote, the movie is a sympathetic observation of a specialized private world. An interview with Livingston in Outweek is titled Pose, she said, and we are told in the preface that she, quote, discovered the ball world by chance. Livingston does not discuss her interest and fascination with black gay subculture. She is not asked to speak about what knowledge, information, or lived understanding of black culture and history she possessed that provided a background for her work, or to explain what vision of black life she hoped to convey and to whom. Well, because the public watching her, it would probably fall asleep about that. Says something about her public. Can anyone imagine that a black woman lesbian would make a film about white gay subculture and not be asked these questions? Livingston is asked in the Outweek interview. And how dare you? How dare you? And who's the MFers promoting this stupid effing film? You piece of SHIT. You bitch. Who is this bitch? Watch, I'm going to pull her up and she's going to be a granny. We're doing it! I can't call somebody a bitch and not know what she looks like. But come on. You know what? It's whatever it is because she's the feminist. So let's see what you look like. Let's just see what you look like. Let's just see what you look like. Well, it's hard to say. Mainly because who knows what they're putting out there, right? I mean, this picture looks like what? Okay, so I can criticize. She's not an old lady in a rocking chair. Not as far as I can see. Oh my gosh, is that where what's his name got his break? Oh, it totally is, isn't it? Oh, come on. The guy who got a late night show. How'd he get that with those jaws? That was a question. Come on, he was with Eddie. Start with Eddie Murphy in that film, Harlem Nights. What was his name? I can't remember. Come on, he was always like, but not that guy. But he kind of was, but he wasn't. Livingston is asked in the Outweek interview, how did you build up the kind of trust where people are so open to talking about their personal experiences? She never answers this question. Instead, she suggests that she gains her credibility by the intensity of her spectatorship, adding, I also targeted people who were articulate, who had stuff they wanted to say, and were very happy that anyone wanted to listen, avoiding the difficult questions underlying what it means to be a white person in a white supremacist society, creating a film about any aspect of Black life. Livingston responds to the question, didn't the fact that you're a white lesbian going into a world of Black queens and street kids make that the interview process, is what she's talking about, difficult by implicitly invoking a shadow sense of universal connection? She responds, if you know someone over a period of 2 years and they still retain their sex and their race, you've got to be a pretty sexist, racist person. Yet it is precisely the race, sex, and sexual practices of Black men who are filmed that is the exploited subject matter. So that's a really, when you associate statements like that with liberals, you can want to throw up in your mouth, right? And they still retain their sex and their race. You've got to be pretty, this is her quote, if you know someone over a period of 2 years and they still retain their sex and their race, you've got to be a pretty sexist, racist person. Fuck you. Look at you. You look disturbed. I'm just saying. So far, I have read no interviews where Livingston discusses the issue of appropriation. And even though she is openly critical of Madonna, she does not convey how her work differs from Madonna's appropriation of Black experience. To some extent, it is precisely the recognition by mass culture, well, that's called jealousy, that aspects of Black life, like voguing fascination, white audience that creates a market for both Madonna's product and Livingston's. Unfortunately, Livingston's comments about Paris's burning do not convey serious thought about either the political and aesthetic implications of her choice as a white woman focusing on an aspect of Black life and culture, or the way racism might shape and inform how she would interpret Black experience on the screen. Well, that is intellectually elevating. Have you seen the movie Paris is Burning? Reviewers like Georgia Brown in The Village Voice, who suggests that Livingston's whiteness is a fact of nature that didn't hinder her research, collude in the denial of the way whiteness informs her perspective and standpoint. To say, as Livingston does, quote, "I certainly don't have the final word on the gay-black experience. I'd love for a black director to have made this film," quote, end quote, is to oversimplify the issue, to absolve her of responsibility and accountability for progressive critical reflection, and it implicitly suggests that there would be no difference between her work and that of a black director. Yeah, maybe you wish a black director would do it. Maybe they haven't done it because this isn't anything about what should be portrayed or is important or critical. It is so fringe. Just like you, Jennifer. Underlying this apparent self-effacing comment is cultural arrogance, for she implies not only that she has cornered the market on the subject matter, but that being able to make films is a question of personal choice, like she discovered the raw material before a black director did. Absolutely. And this is the thing that builds a rational disdain for these kinds of people. It's rational. I don't have to be irrational about it because they're making the irrational shit and calling it rational. I don't care who you are. That's fucking bullshit. I don't care who you are. Her comments are disturbing because they reveal so little awareness of the politics that undergird any commodification of blackness in this society. Yeah, absolutely, you ignorant bitch. Had Livingston approached her subject with greater awareness of the way white supremacy shapes cultural production, she might be deemed appropriate to even speak on this. That's not what it says. Determining not only what representations of blackness are deemed acceptable, marketable, as well worthy of seeing, perhaps the film would not so easily have turned the black drag ball into a spectacle for the entertainment of those presumed to be on the outside of this experience looking in. What do you think she wanted? It's a low-grade intellect. So much of what is expressed in the film has to do with questions of power and privilege and the way racism impedes black progress, and certainly the class aspirations of the black gay subculture depicted do not differ from those of other poor and underclass black communities. Here, the supposedly outsider position is primarily located in the experience of whiteness. Livingston appears unwilling to interrogate the way assuming the position of outsider looking in, as well as interpreter, can and often does pervert and distort one's perspective. Well, look at her. You don't think she wants a bit of perversion? Look at her. I'm not saying judge a book by its cover. I'm just saying that her intellect level is low and she might not get the associations that other people do. Her ability to assume such a position without rigorous interrogation of intent is rooted in the politics of race and racism. Patricia Williams critiques the white assumption of a neutral gaze in her essay, Teleology on the Rocks, included in her new book, The Alchemy of Race and Rights. Describing taking a walking tour of Harlem with a group of white folks, she recalls the guide telling them they might get to see some services since Easter Sunday in Harlem is quite a show. Williams' critical observations are relevant to any discussion of Paris's burning. Now again, that's interesting because I feel like I've seen that. All right, so let's move on to the quotes. That's all I'll say about that. What astonished me was that no one had asked the churches if they wanted to be stared at like living museums. I wondered what would happen if a group of blue jean blacks were to walk uninvited into a synagogue on Passover or St. Anthony's of Padua during High Mass just to peer, not pray. My feeling is that such activity would be seen as disrespectful at the very least. Yet the aspect of disrespect, intrusion, seemed irrelevant to this well-educated, affable group of people. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yet the aspect of disrespect, intrusion, seemed irrelevant to this well-educated, affable group of people. Well, not during service, but you certainly should and did have the feeling that I could walk into a Catholic church at any time. Now it's locked because of all the valuables, but now you used to be able to light a candle in a Catholic church at any time. So that might be just a blurring of culture. They deflected my observation with comments like, we just want to look. No one will mind, and there's no harm intended. As well-intentioned as they were, I was left with the impression that no one existed for them who could not be governed by their intentions. While acknowledging the lack of apparent malice in this behavior, I can't help thinking that it is a liability as much as a luxury to live without interaction. To live so completely impervious to one's own impact on others is a fragile privilege, which over time relies not simply on the willingness, but on the inability of others, in this case blacks, to make their displeasure heard. I would certainly, if you made your displeasure heard, I would certainly not do that again. But it's sort of a ridiculous notion not to expect that. I mean, okay, I'll use this example. Jehovah's Witness. I could see myself walking in during mass times to observe, not for sinister reasons, for knowledge, for education about my spiritual journey, which is exactly why people do those things. Walk into churches to observe. So it shouldn't be so hard to fathom either that unintentional, and you could respond with an education, with an invitation for seeing a ceremony. I mean, come on. What is it? A satanic ritual? I mean, what are you hiding? You know what I'm saying? Because I like to observe and be informed about all kinds of religions. So I myself, as a white woman, could see myself doing that and would be a little bit put out by your attitude about that as a religious leader in a spiritual building. This insightful critique came to mind as I reflected on my whites could so outspokenly make their pleasure in this film heard, and the many black viewers who expressed discontent, raising critical questions about how the film was made, is seen and is talked about, who have not named their displeasure publicly. Too many reviewers and interviewers assume not only that there is no need to raise pressing critical questions about Livingston's film. Now that certainly is true, but act as though she somehow did this marginalized black gay subculture a favor by bringing their experience to a wider public. Such a stance obscures the substantial rewards she has received for this work. Since we can pull up 100 pictures of her on Google immediately. Since so many of the black gay men in the film express the desire to be big stars, it is easy to place Livingston in the role of benefactor, offering these poor black souls a way to realize their dreams. But it is this current trend in producing colorful ethnicity for the white consumer appetite that makes it possible for blackness to be commodified in unprecedented ways, and for whites to appropriate black culture without interrogating whiteness or showing concern for the displeasure of blacks. Just as white cultural imperialism informed and affirmed the adventurous journeys of colonizing whites into the countries and cultures of dark others, it allows white audiences to applaud representations of black culture if they are satisfied with the images and habits of being represented. Now, this actually was probably in my philosophical class with that ding dong, whose first name I think her name was Jennifer Livingston. I think she was Filipino. Not to put a race on everything, but to say that person was neither white nor black. But that goes to show you my memory may not be accurate on that account, but I think I threw everything out. I wanted no association with her at all. I really didn't care for what she taught or how she taught. She was definitely the type of person who would have been a fan of Jennifer Livingston. Okay, so watching the film with the black woman friend, we were disturbed by the extent to which white folks around us were entertained and pleasured by scenes we viewed as sad and at times tragic. Often individuals laughed at personal testimony about hardship, pain, loneliness. Several times I yelled out in the dark, "What is so funny about this scene? What are you laughing? Why are you laughing?" The laughter was never innocent. Instead, it undermined the seriousness of the film, keeping it always on the level of spectacle. And much of the film helped make this possible. Moments of pain and sadness were quickly covered up by the dramatic scenes from drag balls, as though there were two competing cinematic narratives, one displaying the pageantry of the drag ball and the other reflecting on the lives of participants and value of the fantasy. This second narrative was literally hard to hear because the laughter often drowned it out, just as the sustained focus on elaborate displays at balls diffused the power of the more serious critical narrative. Any audience hoping to be entertained would not be interested in the true life stories and testimonies narrated. Much of the individual testimony makes it appear that the characters are estranged from any community beyond themselves. Families, friends, etc. are not shown, which adds to the representation of these black gay men as cut off, living on the edge. It is useful to compare the portraits of their living in Paris in their lives in Paris is Burning with those depicted in Marlon Riggs's compelling film Tongues United. At no point in Livingston's film are the men asked to speak about their connections to a world of family and community beyond the drag ball. I remember that as well. The cinematic narrative makes the ball the center of their lives, and yet who determines this? Is this the way the black men view their reality, or is this the reality Livingston constructs? Because the black community is not typically without backdrop of family, and if they're not with the backdrop of family, number one, that means that we don't have the necessary mental nets, catch whatever in place, and that instead is a perversion of that family life where the people I can depend on are people who can't depend on themselves, much less have somebody else depend on them. So that's not the backdrop of most black families. The tragedy is made explicit when we are told that the fair-skinned Venus has been murdered, and yet there is no mourning of her in the film, no intense focus on the sadness of this murder. Having served the purpose of spectacle, the film abandons her. The audience does not see Venus after the murder. There are no scenes of grief. To put it crassly, her dying is upstaged by spectacle. Death is not entertaining. That was the same thing with, oh gosh, what was that movie? Oh, doggone it. Where the black woman was murdered and there was a film of from the 1930s, something like that. Who was it about? Well, it was that series I was watching. And she was murdered, and oh gosh, what was the series about? So it ended with an interview, and that wasn't very, and there was no investigation, nobody cared. And that was a reflection of the times. Why would they spend manpower investigating that? So what? You mean because a white person caused that murder? So what? Right? Why would I spend manpower investigating that? You know what I mean? Okay. So, the next chapter is Madonna. Keep your ears burning. This second narrative was literally hard to hear. I already read that. Any audience hoping to be entertained would not be interested in the true life stories and testimonies. All right. Oh, got that. Got it. For those of us who did not come to this film as voyeurs of black gay culture, it is Dorian Carey's moving testimony throughout the film that makes Paris is Burning a memorable experience. Carey is both historian and cultural critic in the film. He explains how the balls enabled marginalized black gay queens, 0.01% of the population, to empower both participants and audience. It is Carey who talks about the significance of the star in the life of gay black men who are queens, in a manner similar to critic Richard Dyer in his work Heavenly Bodies. Carey tells viewers that the desire for stardom is an expression of the longing to realize that dream of autonomous stellar individualism, reminding readers that the idea of the individual continues to be a major image of what it means to live in a democratic world. Right? We are individualistic. So exactly what that's speaking. Pay attention to me. I'm a victim. I'm a teacher. I'm a wife. I'm a woman. I'm just trying to get rid of the criminality. So don't point your finger at me. I've been put here as an individual in isolation. I'm a community-minded person. So Dyer writes, capitalism justifies itself on the basis of the freedom, separateness of anyone who makes money, sell their labor how they will, to be able to express opinions and get them heard, regardless of wealth or social position. The openness of society is assumed by the way that we are addressed as individuals, as consumers, each freely choosing to buy or watch what we want, as legal subjects equally responsible before the law, as political subjects able to make up our minds who is to run society. Thus, even while the notion of the individual is assailed on all sides, it is necessary fiction for the reproduction of the kind of society we live in. Stars articulate these ideas of personhood. This is precisely the notion of stardom Carey articulates. He emphasizes the way consumer capitalism undermines the subversive power of the drag ball, subordinating ritual to spectacle, removing the will to display unique, imaginative costumes and the purchased image. Carey speaks profoundly about the redemptive power of the imagination of black life, that drag balls were traditionally a place where the aesthetics of the image in relation to black gay life could be explored with complexity and grace. It's such bullshit because, again, you're talking about 0.01% of the population, and why do you want to put your magnifying glass on this when there are better representations of what you're saying? all that is a distraction of what needs to be said, in my mind. Carey extols the significance of fantasy even as he critiques the use of fantasy to escape reality. Analyzing the place of fantasy in black gay subculture, he links that experience. Excuse me, hold on. We're almost done. I'm almost done with that. That's too bad. Oh, but that honey tea does the trick. Carey extols the significance of fantasy even as he critiques the use of fantasy to escape reality. Analyzing the place of fantasy in black gay subculture, he links that experience to the longing for stardom, refusing to allow the queen to be othered. He conveys the message that in all of us resides that longing to transcend the boundaries of self, to be glorified. Wrong. Exactly. Speaking about the importance of drag queens in a recent interview in After Image, Marlon Riggs suggests that the queen personifies the longing everyone has for love and recognition. Not to desperation. And nobody wants that because that's not love. That means I'm desperate to fall in love with anybody. That's not love. See, and also it serves a self-interest. The self is, as they're saying, promoted above all else. The need for the self, which is a physical need. That's what they're promoting. Seeing in drag queens a desire, quote, a very visceral need to be loved, as well as a sense of the abject loneliness of life where nobody loves you, end quote. Riggs contends, quote, this image is real for anybody who has been in the bottom spot where they've been rejected by everybody and loved. Yes, but not necessarily. I mean, come on. Can we just not go more intravenously to look for the saving grace where we can create a better mental picture of this film? Echoing Carey, Riggs declares, what's real for them is the realization that you have to learn to love yourself. Carey stresses that one can only learn to love the self when one breaks through illusion and faces reality, not by escaping into fantasy, emphasizing that the point is not to give us fantasy, but to recognize its limitations. He acknowledges that one must distinguish the place of fantasy and ritualized play from the use of fantasy as a means of escape. Unlike Pepper LeBeha, who constructs a mythic world to inhabit, making this his private reality, Carey encourages using the imagination creatively to enhance one's capacity to live more fully in a world beyond fantasy. Despite the prolonged impact he makes, what Riggs would call a visual icon of the drag queen with a very dignified humanity, Carey's message, if often muted, is overshadowed by spectacle. It is hard for viewers to really hear this message. Again, how far below the surface do we have to go to get your grain of salt, which is not a diamond, by the way? By critiquing absorption and fantasy and naming the myriad ways pain and suffering inform any process of self-actualization, Carey's message mediates between the viewers who longs to voyeuristically escape into film, to vicariously inhabit that lived space on the edge by exposing the sham, by challenging all of us to confront reality. James Baldwin makes the point in The Fire Next Time that people who cannot suffer can never grow up, can never discover who they are. Without being sentimental about suffering, Dorian Carey urges all of us to break through denial, through the longing for an illusory star identity, so that we can confront and accept ourselves as we really are. Only then can fantasy ritual be a site of seduction, passion, and play where the self is truly recognized, loved, and never abandoned or betrayed. Love it. And since we have a social need, how about that in our relationships? How about that where we can be seduced, where we can have passion and play, where we are recognized, loved, and never abandoned or betrayed? Isn't that what we're looking for in every relationship. It's just completely, it's beyond irresponsible, because what she does, Livingston does, is she doesn't border, she delves right deeply into stupidity, and then sits back and has everybody else figure out her mystery. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. That was chapter 9. Thanks so much for joining me here in the reading room. It is Wednesday, January 21st, and we have concluded another day, day 301 in the classroom. Thanks so much for joining me here on Hump Day, where we are getting your mind, your what? We are getting your mind, your body, and your spirit healthier with every hour of the classroom. Thanks for joining me.